So welcome everybody to this evening session. Big welcome to the people at Wat Buddhanasorn, any Venerable's present, respects to you. Wonderful to have you with us also. Thank you for joining us. And welcome to everyone else. And to the Venerable, to the Anagarika. We have a chance to have an evening of Dhamma, reflections and meditation. So let's begin as usual with the meditation time. And we have about 40 minutes to sit together, and I'll give some guidance for the first little while. So please make yourselves comfortable and closing the eyes. Coming into the sense of here, body. This is our where, isn't it? This is the place where we are, where we feel kind of located, coming here and feeling how it is right now. So good to make time to sit, finding a quiet place, closing the eyes, giving us a chance to let go of all the momentum that's pushing us or pulling us around. Actually, we don't just let go of the momentum, do we? But we have a chance to observe it. And to choose to stop gives us this chance to feel all the pressures, the emotions, the thoughts and ideas, the projects, all these kind of complexes that fill our space if we're not careful. To stay mindful, make space, and observe the flow of karma. So here we are, breathing deep, allowing the body to relax more fully. We can cast our attention around the body and see, is there any tension here? Is there any holding? And if there is, we can breathe deeply into those places. Feel the breath in those muscles. I like to bring in the rhythm of the breathing to help body awareness and to allow for relaxation. All we have to do is be present, isn't it, for areas of tension, and they very naturally unwind. There's a softening and an easefulness that comes in quite naturally as we observe, as we give our attention. Attention is like love, isn't it? Loving attention, making space, accepting the way things are, being present. So this loving attention, we can spread all around the body and feel the effect. Coming home. This is our home for now. This is the place of feeling, the place we can experience, isn't it? So let's be here. To meditate is like coming into the temple, sitting down, closing the eyes, getting an upright posture, coming into the temple, coming into the body. Sacred space of mindfulness right here. So can we bring our attention to bear on this body, this feeling, sentient form, and see how it reveals what's happening for us. And all that momentum, all the energy of doing, being, having, holding, we can observe. All the sense of me and mine, my problem, we can observe. Like observing a sort of knot, a tangle, a pressure. Just like observing those muscles, sometimes holding tension, and seeing them gradually relax with our kind, loving attention. So with the mind, let's observe all those tangles softening, loosening. There's no problem that we have that is not served by leaving it alone in this way, isn't it? Just to be present is to allow any issues, any problems, some space, bring in some peace, some wisdom, and see how the picture can change. Just to feel what we feel. Spirit of kindness and a spirit of curiosity, interest. Moving the attention around the body, feeling the breath. This is our resort, our place of mindfulness. This is the pasture. From this place, we can observe, can't we, the thoughts coming and going, perhaps, emotions, moods, states of mind. We can become aware of how it is without getting involved. We can observe objectively. This is not to ignore, minimize, sideline, anything at all. This is wise application of attention. Yoniso manasikara. It's like standing on the ground. We can be buffeted by the winds, mental energy, emotions, like the waters, but not flooded, not overwhelmed. We stand firm on the ground of Kayanupasana, body awareness, Vedananupasana, feeling the simple feelings here. This body, our temple. So we can all sit in the temple together. Stay in the temple. Let the wind do what it likes. The waters flow as they wish. Sit steady. Touch the ground. So I'd like to invite you to very gently come into this shared space, our evening Sangha gathering. A good stretch, be comfortable, give the body some kindness, and see, is there any sense of residual mood? Were there any thoughts that were obsessing the mind? Was there anything particularly intense for you this evening in the meditation time? Is there anything carrying through for you? Or were you able to experience some peace and spaciousness? We can just assess. The beauty of this practice is there's no rights and wrongs. It's just observing the way things are. That is our only task, really. And so we can very kindly, come out of this meditation with a good wish for ourselves, with a heart of loving kindness for this one. So I'd like to offer some words of Dhamma and begin by paying homage to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So, dear friends, we've been exploring Vedana-nupassana, the second resort of mindfulness, over the last week or so here at Dhammadharani on this winter retreat, where our theme is the Satipatthana Sutta, as many of you know. So I thought I'd speak a little bit more about this second resort of mindfulness tonight, Vedana-nupassana. And actually, we were speaking on Sunday about how it relates to dependent origination. We had a beautiful sutta which was in verse form, and one of the lines was pointing to contact, pussa, that feeling arises as a result of contact. And this is happening every moment, isn't it? And we can, when we practice meditation, we can really become aware of this. Actually, we can sometimes find it difficult because a lot of feeling is quite neutral. It's not intense. It's not particularly pleasant or particularly painful. It's the other kind, the neither pleasant nor painful feeling. And so we can sometimes not recognize that there's always this impingement happening. There is contact. And we can just realize this when we consider these six senses and how constantly they are being bombarded. Someone pointed out the other day that even when your eyes are closed, you're still seeing. I thought that was brilliant because it hadn't really occurred to me before. When the eyes are closed, the eye sense door is still operating exactly the same way. We're just seeing behind the eyelids, but there is seeing happening. And of course, with hearing, we can't shut it off unless we stick, big plugs in our ears. It's happening. And the same with touch. Taste, we can consider. There's always those taste bud experiences. Usually we're tasting a fairly neutral saliva in the mouth taste, but there is a taste there. And then when we eat or drink, the taste is much more noticeable. But of course, if we're eating and drinking while we're reading a book or we're having a conversation, we can just not notice actually a lot of the tasting, a lot of the smelling. So it's interesting, isn't it, that we're constantly being bombarded with feeling, with input through the sense doors, which results in feeling. And fortunately, of course, as practitioners, we can make use of this for liberation. Independent origination, the Buddha is pointing to this incredible realization that he had after he became the Buddha. He contemplated, we're told, dependent arising for a week. I think it's a week, could have been longer. Just considering how all things are interconnected, how things arise because of causes, and how that chain of cause and effect actually manifests. And there are 12 links in the chain of dependent origination, as many of you know. And the Buddha was really explaining, how it is we come to find ourselves in this situation of having a life, having a flow of the life energy with some kind of karma that is the momentum that propels this life forward, and that kind of compels us, if we're not very mindful, to act and speak and do in certain ways. The Buddha points out in this dependent origination that we're born because of ignorance. So there's some kind of not seeing, some kind of confusion, a lack of understanding here. And this ignorance leads to mental formations. There's in a way you could call it, I like to call it unfinished business. It's like we have some mental complexes here that are requiring some kind of action, some kind of, there's a momentum, there's a propulsion, there's a force behind these formations. And because of this, name and form come into being. That's us, that's birth, that's having a body and mind. And this body and mind is a cause rather, for the six senses that we're experiencing all the time. There's cause and effect. So ignorance leads to formations, mental formations, some kind of mental activity that requires form. Form is the result. And from that form come the six senses. And what happens when we have these six senses operating? We're receiving all the time, contact from what feels like the outside world coming in. The cause for contact is these six senses. And then the Buddha could see how, contact then results in feeling. And actually, what happens when there's contact through any of the six sense doors I'm talking about, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and also thinking, the mind sense door, what happens when contact occurs? Feeling, either pleasant, painful, or neutral. Feeling in the body. How amazing. We're constantly reacting. We're constantly relating in this way. And very quickly, from feeling arises the next link in the chain, craving, wanting, wanting and not wanting, a reaction. The feeling itself is simple in a way, isn't it? It's pleasant, painful, or neutral, arising from contact constantly through all the six sense doors. It's fairly simple, but this arises very quickly. It leads rather very quickly onto the next link in this chain of dependent origination, which is a reaction, a response. I like it, I don't like it. Or I'm neutral. I'm not really noticing. And then the Buddha went on to recognize that, okay, so there are feelings, and these feelings lead to reactivity. This reactivity can escalate. Craving leads to clinging. We start to reify. We start to really dive into the experiences and make them mine, and identify and care for them, and want more or want less, get involved to a greater and greater extent. And this clinging, what does it lead to? The next link in the chain, becoming. So we're creating karma. We're creating this momentum. This becoming energy leads to birth, and from birth to old age, sickness, death, and round we go. All these links are interconnected in all sorts of different ways, but this is a very simple two-dimensional way of looking at the dependent arising, codependent arising. The Buddha was really saying that there's nothing that happens, exists, or is that doesn't have a cause. And if we can recognize that, we can simply observe cause and effect, cause and effect. We can do this on a grand scale. You know, we can recognize the reason I'm born is because there was some kind of push, there was some kind of becoming energy that sort of moved into a form, moved into life. It's really very mysterious, isn't it? But the Buddha said, in order for birth to happen, what do you need? You need a father, you need a mother, you need them to come together, and you need to have a being that is willing to be born. So we're here because of this momentum, this becoming energy that leads to birth, that leads to death. And we can look at the dependent arising in so many other ways, but the most important way for us to examine it is in terms of suffering and the end of suffering. So we can say pretty clearly that this whole chain of dependent arising is suffering. It's about how suffering is constantly being created here. And to recognize that it also holds the key, doesn't it, to the way out of suffering. If suffering is arising because of particular reasons, then we can look at those reasons and see whether they're necessary or not. And they're not. So we have the forward momentum of this particular order of dependent arising, and then we have the reverse momentum, the demomentum, the slowing down, the stopping, even the reversing of this process. And what's really interesting, coming back to Vedananupassana, is that the place where we can actually make a difference, reverse this process, is in this place of feeling, recognizing contact, feeling the feelings, and noticing the next thing that's very likely to happen is some kind of reactivity, desire, the Buddha called it tanha. It's a simple umbrella term for all the wanting and not wanting energy, the desire and aversion, liking and not liking, pushing and pulling, the kind of argument with reality. It's not enough, or it's too much. I don't want it, or I want more of it. It's like a non-acceptance of the way things are. More suffering, more selfing. So tanha, this word, craving, covers all of this, reactivity. And so this is the place we can feel what we feel. We can observe that inclination, that tendency, that very quick, very swift tendency to react, and we can stay steady. And when we do this, we are able to perceive, the momentum that's there, and just let it be and see how it's almost like, for me, a wheel turning. It's turning in a worldly direction, we could say. It's turning towards more becoming, more suffering, more birth and death. But when we stay steady at this place, where contact leads to feeling, leads to suffering, desire, and we stay very steady and we don't fall for that. We don't take the next place, the next step. Then we can see it's like the wheel can start to slow down. We can start to notice what's actually happening. And gradually, as we develop our practice, we can almost perceive the wheel stopping. There are moments, aren't there, of peace. There are moments when there's nothing actually propelling us, where we can really feel we've let everything go. We're empty. There's no we even, or me. There's just this. Peace, tranquility, equanimity. And these moments kind of coalesce and start to become more of a norm for us. They string together. There's a more lasting sense of peace and well-being. This wheel can stop. But it doesn't just want to stop. We want to turn it in the opposite direction. We want to decondition. We want to step out of this momentum of karma. And this is what we do, isn't it? This is where, when we sit and meditate, we might have moments of peace, and then we may have some memory, some thought, some emotion come up. Something from the past comes up and starts to play out. And we stay steady and we simply observe, feeling right now. And we can feel again that inclination to make more, to dwell in, to roll around in that, whatever it is, it's suffering, to roll around in that past memory or that strong feeling that's arisen for us. And we don't do that. We stay steady. And we allow then all the sankhara that are in the mind to sort of bubble up onto the surface and to arise and to last for some time and then to pass away. And we can see then, it's like the wheel of becoming starts to go into reverse mode. We're stepping out of this karmic flow. We're making sense of it. We're shining a light of knowledge, understanding on this first link in the chain of ignorance. The sankhara that have led to us being here, to this predicament that we're in, are starting to disentangle. We're reversing the entire process, coming out of birth, coming out of suffering. Ah, what a relief. And when the Buddha speaks about nibbana, you know, the cooling, the extinguishment, as Bhante Sujato translates the word nibbana, extinguishment, we can feel, oh my goodness, you know, I don't want that. I don't want to disappear. But actually, when we understand dependent origination and we understand this momentum that's relentlessly pushing us forward into more and more suffering, and we perceive, we relate to this sense of stopping the reactivity, feeling what we feel, not making any more of it, letting go of all the mental hooks. Who's to blame? What's the story? Letting all of that go and just staying present. And then we get to know this reversing, this process of clearing out the temple, clearing out the clutter, cleaning up the mess, you know, going into all those rooms that have been neglected for so long and cleaning them up, understanding why we came to be here, letting go of ignorance. As we get a flavor of this, these ways in which we can notice liberation, we start to notice freedom. We start to notice the deliciousness of peace. Then we can begin to understand why nibbana is extinguishment and why that's perfectly, wonderfully okay. It's like, yes, please. You know, we get to understand that actually to be able to let go of all the suffering, of all the issues, of all the energy that's pushing us all the time on the treadmill of samsara is not something to pursue, is something to happily, joyfully relinquish. Watch it fade away. Watch our relationship with all of this suffering begin to fade away. At the turning away of dispassion, we can really recognize that this is all very good. This is the direction we want to go in. The Buddha said, you know, the samsara is like a stream or a river. Didn't he in the Dhammapada verse? It's like a flowing river. Samsara, the worldly energy, the worldly momentum for us. And the spiritual life, the path of practice, is flowing in exactly the opposite direction. I find that very beautiful. To me, it's a real simile for this dependent origination and the understanding of the forward and the reverse momentum there, and how we can get into the reverse flow. It's going in the opposite direction. But what this means really is that everything in our life, everything that's brought this, you could say that's brought us to this point, is exactly what we need to be able to step out of it. So it's the very flow of that momentum, of that river, of this karma, this karmic predicament, that is the doorway for liberation right here. We just need to watch it, see it, understand it, use it, you know, use all our experiences right now to open the doors to freedom. So it's really great to consider dependent arising and to see that, you know, in many ways it's spoken about as over lifetimes, so that there's beginning, ignorance, leading to sankhara, leading to birth, leading to mind and body. That is this life. That is why I was born. And having been born, there is this body and mind, there are the six senses, there's contact, there's feeling, and there's reactivity. This lifetime, I have the choice. Do I react? Do I continue the cycle, which leads on to craving, clinging, becoming, birth and death? Or do I choose to make a difference right there? To understand feeling, to give space, to be present for that, and to not take the next step into reactivity. But there's this lifetime way of looking at dependent arising, as I've just said, but also we can see it as a moment by moment unfolding, moment by moment. Where there is ignorance, there will be some kind of force, mental force, that we can observe. There'll be moods arising and passing. There'll be all sorts of mental arisings. This is Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana. We can observe these things. We can observe the state of mind. We can observe thinking. If we can rest in awareness and observe these processes, this is where ignorance can turn to knowledge. So right there, at the beginning of the dependent arising, you can see every moment there are these opportunities, but much simpler to pay attention to the body, to the breath, to feelings. Because here we can simplify. It's quite difficult to observe sankhara and not feel identified with them, not feel like my thoughts are my thoughts. But when it comes to feelings, when it comes to this body, it's easier to begin to develop a degree of understanding that this is not me, it's not mine. It's a little bit easier to work with feelings, with body, but we can also work with mind and illuminate the ignorance, see it fade away. Dependent arising, the entire chain of dependent arising that I've described can be seen as a moment by moment experience, and any part of that can be a place for consideration, reflection, contemplation, and freedom. So this is something really worth considering. You can look it up because I've talked about the links in the chain of dependent arising, but what's really helpful, is to have a kind of graph, have it, written and put on the wall somewhere, and really consider each of those links. We can contemplate in our meditation each and every one of them. We can, for instance, we can meditate and simply pay attention to the sense doors and notice this bombardment, constant bombardment, and how actually we can only be aware of one sense door at a time. But it's a constant interplay going on, isn't it, between thinking, seeing, feeling, tasting, touching, and so forth. We can also observe the mind, observe the thinking mind. If we're really aware, just like watching a movie, it's just a series of stills, one after another, very quickly. When we're caught up in thinking, it's very quick, but it's just one thought after another. There's only ever one at a time. And sometimes they connect and create some kind of big complex. And sometimes they're quite, random. As you probably know, isn't it? When we meditate, we can see often the random nature of thinking. The Buddha said, like a monkey, didn't he, jumping around from branch to branch. We can observe thinking. We can observe birth. When I have an idea of something that I want, I can choose to observe that feeling of wanting, which is usually some kind of pleasant feeling that wants to grow. And I can let it develop into craving and into clinging. And then I can let it develop into birth. I can go and get what I want. That's birth right there. And of course, birth leads to old age, sickness, and death. So I have the ice cream that I want. And then it's over. It's died already. It doesn't last very long. And we can reflect on these things and see the dependent arising. And do I really want to witness that death again and again? Or shall I just not bother with the birth? Shall I just stay with the feeling? And when I stay with the feeling, it arises, it lasts for a while, and then it passes away. And I don't have to have that thing. This is a beautiful practice for us. We can renounce a lot. And actually, you might think, well, we'd be depriving ourselves of all these good things, but you do know better than that. It's peaceful, isn't it? Not to have this, but not to need to have so many things, just to be comfortable here. And to be able to observe the mind going through its likes and dislikes and not to make any more of that is the most wonderful experience for us, isn't it? And it's an experience of renunciation. We're letting go. Letting go. We can observe that and feel the delicious flavor of letting go and enjoy and make much of that. This is an unworldly, pleasant feeling that we can make much of. Sense desire gives us pleasant feelings, so transient. Birth and death follow swiftly. But when we observe desire and we don't act on it, we allow it to arise and pass, that letting go, the feeling of well-being, freedom, happiness, that lasts, doesn't it? So these are just a few reflections on dependent arising and how valuable it can be to consider each of those links in the chain and how extraordinary it is to recognize that right in the middle there, that place where contact leads to feelings and feelings could, often do, lead to wanting, not wanting, that this is the place where we can rest our attention. And when we do this consistently, mindfully, kindly, patiently, then we are liberating the heart right there. And if we stay steady, all the wanting and not wanting will slow down, cool down. We'll experience some peace. And as that peace grows and manifests for us, we can start to see how we get to reverse this whole cycle. So we're, rather than running on the treadmill of samsara, flowing with that stream of samsara, we're turning and we're going in the opposite direction. And we're freeing the heart. We don't have to go searching. We don't have to eke out the defilements or look for them particularly hard. They'll come. They'll reveal themselves. They'll come up where we make that space for them. And so we get to see the heart liberating itself. All that's required is a kind of continuity of practice, a willingness to just patiently continue to observe in this way. So it's wonderful to recognize that feeling, body awareness, feelings in the body is the doorway. It is a profound, effective way that will inevitably, inexorably move us in the direction of Nibbana. It'll take us right there, all the way to the final goal. So I really wish you well with this practice and with this consideration of dependent arising. Amen. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu,